Let me run a scenario by ya fellas. You want to play your favorite mid-tier ship. You pick it, Scharnhorst in my case, and you click that bright orange battle button. You watch that circle spin around a few times, and then you get dumped into a match. But when you check the team lineups, lo and behold, you're not top tier, you're bottom tier. In fact, you're very bottom tier because it's you, maybe one or three other tier 7 ships in that match, and then the rest of the team are tier 9 ships. You've just been double up tiered. And double up tiering is something that is, well, quite frustrating, especially if you are unlucky enough to have it happen to you back to back to back, as it can happen, unfortunately, in some cases. However, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, because when you do get double up tiered, there is an opportunity there for you. We're going to talk about how you can best make use of this opportunity in this video, and also talk about, getting double up tiered in general, and how you can, again, best make the situation work in your favor. But first, why does it happen? Well, you see, the very simple answer is the player base. By that, I mean, World Warships has an incredibly stable player base, surprisingly, believe it or not, but it isn't exactly the largest, especially if you're on a server like the North American server or the SCA server, because those are the two smaller servers, right? And when you are playing the game, especially depending upon what time you're playing the game, there can be a simple lack of players, and the matchmaker needs to make these high-tier matches happen, right? And the matchmaker also puts an emphasis on quick queue times, because no one wants to be sitting in queue for 3 or 4 or 5 minutes. That it doesn't sound bad on paper, but trust me, from someone that's been playing War Thunder Naval, it gets old really friggin' fast. So the matchmaker puts an emphasis on speed. That's my cat meowing. 1 second. She meows to get in, she meows to get out. Now, another thing is that there are, in my mind at least, 2 different types of up-tiering. You've got the normal up-tiering that isn't so bad, and then you got what I call the hard up-tiering. The normal up-tiering is when you go into a game in a tier 7 or, whatever tier ship. I'm just using tier 7 as an example because I played a bunch of Scharnhorst this morning. You go into battle in a tier 7 ship. You get into the match and you've got, a decent amount of tier 7 ships, a few tier 8 ships, and then you've got, maybe 1 or 2 tier 9 ships per side, right? That's pretty normal and pretty manageable and isn't really that big of an issue. It's kind of organic because, during World War II, you had all these new ships that were being produced, but, you didn't have too many of them. So you'd have a couple of, new 1940s era ships in the mix with a bunch of ships from the 30s and 20s. So that makes sense from a historical point of view and from a matchmaking point of view. And that really isn't that bad of a match to manage. But what does suck is when you get the hard up tiering, where it's you and maybe one other guy in a tier 7 ship and a tier 9 game where it's mostly tier 9s and maybe you have 1 or 2 tier 8s, and you both are sitting at each other, looking at each other in the pregame loading screen, and you're both just going, oh, we ain't doing jack this match, because, yeah, getting double up tiered does suck, especially when it's the hard up tiering like that. Now, when you do get double up tiered, it does matter what class you're in, because while getting double up tiered does suck across the board, some classes make it suck less. Now, I'm not saying that there's a certain class that doesn't care about being double up tiered. No, they all do, but just by the fact of how the class system works and how the classes are designed, it does suck more than some others, right? But anyway, if you're in something like a destroyer, a light cruiser, or a heavy cruiser, you can typically still fall back on, like cruisers, for example. They're DPM, they still have the rapid firing guns. They can still shoot HE unless you're the British light cruisers, or you can still shoot SAP if you're the Italians, and you can still do damage that way, because HE, yeah, you may not be getting fantastic alpha damage with your pins because you're facing ships that have heavier armor than you, but you still have a chance to start a fire. Fire doth not care about tier, fire doth not care about class. It's going to burn for a certain percentage no matter what happens, and you are going to get that damage done and get rewarded for that, right? Torpedoes don't really give a crap about anything unless they're deep water torpedoes, right? They don't care if you're a destroyer, if you're a battleship, if you are a cruiser. They're still going to hit you, and they're still going to do damage, and they're still going to have a pretty high chance of starting a flood on you unless they hit your torpedo protection, right? So destroyers and cruisers can typically fall back on one of those two things, again, depending upon what nation you're playing and such. Battleships and aircraft carriers kind of have it the roughest. Aircraft carriers because, well, of course, their planes are of a certain tier. When you're a tier 8 aircraft carrier and you get up tiered to a tier 10 game, depending upon what tier 8 CV you're in and your plane regeneration time and your plane HP and all this stuff, it typically isn't a fantastic time unless you're in something like the Kaga, right, that has a ridiculous plane regeneration rate, or like the Enterprise, which that's still the only broken thing about it today, is that it's got that 60-second or lower plane regeneration rate on most of its planes, right? So getting a double up tiered in like a CV really sucks. Getting double up tiered in a battleship really sucks because, well, by battleship standards, tier 7 battleships, they tend to, 1, not be accurate, 2, not be stealthy, and 3, well, their guns aren't that large, usually by higher tier standards, again, unless you're playing 1 or 2 certain ships, right? So the battleship things, you can't overmatch stuff because your gun caliber probably isn't large enough. You're not stealthy by that tier standards, or really stealthy at all because you're a battleship. 3, you still have enough HP to look delicious to the enemy team, so they're going to want to farm you, and they can farm you because, well, you're a tier 7 ship in a tier 9 game war, again, a tier 5 ship in a tier 7 game war, again, whatever, you can apply it across the board, right? The power gap between tier 7 and tier 9 is probably the roughest, right? But of course, tier 5 to tier 7, that power gap is pretty bad as well, of course. But again, I'm just using tier 7 as an example because I played a bunch of Scharnhorst this morning. So, all in all, you're not being set up for success, right, when you get double up tiered. But what can you do in this situation? Well, what you can do is go after them high tier ships. Why? Because you do get a boost to your income when you get double up tiered. When you are doing damage to a ship that's 2 tiers higher than you, you get, I believe it's like a 0.50 increase to the amount of credits and XP you can earn from the match. So even though you maybe only did like half of your normal damage, if you did that to a higher tier ship, to a ship that's 2 tiers higher than you, that's a decent chunk of change that you're going to be earning during that match. You'd be surprised at how fast the economic buff that you get when you do damage to ships that are of a higher tier than you really starts to add up. If you do, let's say, half of your average damage in like a double up tier game, so again like a tier 7 ship and a tier 9 game, and most of that damage was to tier 9 ships, and then you go back down to a tier 7 game and do your average damage number, when you compare the results of both matches, you'd be surprised to find that double up tier game, you probably made, if not the same, more credits and XP than you made in your standard tier 7 match. It really starts to add up, especially if you're running like premium time or the economic bonuses and such, and that's exactly why it's there. So when you do get stuck in these double up tier games, you can at least keep up with your average performance and such, and keep grinding out to your next ship or the mod or whatever it is you are grinding to. And again, that's where you can really, make the most out of these double up tier games, especially if you're in a premium ship and get double up tiered. You can really, really make away with the bank if you know what you're doing and you have a ship that's good at farming. Now, of course, obviously, if you're grinding through a tech line, that's not exactly going to be the most helpful bit of information other than shoot the higher tier ships, because you'll get that nice little boost. But what's really nice is when you are in a double up tier game in a low tier ship and you actually have a pretty decent game, because it does happen. You catch someone off guard, you sink a tier 9 ship, or, whatever. Again, if you're a tier 5, a tier 7 ship, you manage to, put in some work and actually get some stuff done. Then you're really making money at that point. But again, obviously, that's not every game. As far as tips for when you do get double up tiered, well, the best tip I can give you is know your ship. You have to know your ship. You have to know what her weaknesses are. You have to know what her strengths are. That way you can adapt to the situation accordingly. Scharnhorst, for example. When I get double up tiered in Scharnhorst, I just play it like a cruiser because at tier 9, she's basically in a gear, right? With actually smaller guns than the gear. So I play it like a slightly heavily, well, not slightly heavier armored, very much heavily armored gear with smaller guns. So, run around at mid-range, shoot AP at broadside targets, things go angled in, switch over to HE, start slinging HE at the targets, go after the cruisers, load HE when the DDs are spotted and such, right? So you have to adapt to the situation accordingly, and each ship is different. You got to know your ship, know its strengths, and know its weaknesses, but again, go after them high-tier ships. If they're going to farm you for damage, you're going to farm them from damage, and the difference is you're going to make a profit on it. They're going to make a profit, but it's not going to be as great because they're not getting that bonus to their income that you are getting. So even though they might sink you, you've probably made it away in the exchange economically better than them if you want to wage a little bit of economic warfare. So double up tiering, while it does suck, it's a fact of the game. It's a fact of matchmaking. It's going to happen. The best you can do is, again, get what you can get out of it. Farm those higher tier ships down if you can. Learn your ship, adapt and overcome, and go on to the next match where you hopefully won't be up tiered as hard. Because again, when we hit that battle button, we're in the hand of the matchmaking overlords, and well, they're doing drugs sometimes. We can get some pretty funny matches out of it, but I mean, it is what it is, and of course, it's probably not going to change at all. But anyway, guys, that's my 2 cents on getting double up tiered. Let me know what you guys think about that in the comments down below. Hope you all have a wonderful Wednesday, wonderful rest of your week. Hope to catch you guys in the next one.